Here's the thing. My generation was bored. Like we didn't have the things. We had like Atari and Pong. Well, we had
Right.
Pong before Atari. Like that is not a game you want to sit around and play. It's boring. It was boring then even, but it was cool because like, look, you can do this on the TV. That's cool. Most of the time we were sitting outside looking up at the, clouds and like, laying on the grass. And now I kind of long for that. Like I want more of that because the same disease you guys have, which is short attention span, we have it too. Like just because we were around before it was a thing, and there is something about unplugging that's really important. And we can speak to that, but that doesn't mean we do it because
Yeah.
we're caught in the same thing. Like, information's coming. Look, this is cool. And it's like, stop. Is it all, just too
Yeah.
much sometimes?
Yeah. I like to think about it too of like, I've talked before in other podcasts about your generation being usually having more social skills or being able to do harder things or having thicker skins and this and that. And, I've also talked about me like waking up early for a job now, right? Like I wake up early all the time, but it's like,
Mm.
I don't wake up early because I want to. I wake up early because I have to get to work on time. It's like you didn't develop a thick skin because you were 19, was like you were 15, were like, man, I really need to develop a thick skin for life. You're
Right.
like, no, the world was just a little harsher back then. All right. Or you had more social skills, not because you're like, oh, this is good for me. You were like, no, you had to go to the cafeteria. You had to meet people at a bar, right?
Yes.
You had to go to class.
Yeah.
And we don't have to do any of those things. And so like, that's been a big part of, when I coach other people, it's like structure of like, you almost have to force yourself in a lot of these situations.
This is Building the Blueprint, and it's all about education and entertainment. Self-help content is great, but it gets really, really boring. And every single week, I have an important and successful guest. And not only do we shoot the shit, but we have insightful conversations. So you both laugh and learn at the same time. I hope you stick around, because this is Building the Blueprint.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a great guest today, Freeman Michael. Freeman Michaels is a transformational leadership coach, trainer, author, and speaker. He specializes in helping people unlock their authentic potential and develop genuine leadership presence. Freeman works with leaders across retail, government, finance, healthcare, hospitality, and education to build team-oriented cultures that drive authentic human connection. Most importantly, though, Freeman strives to bridge corporate demands and meaningful workplace relationships, a balance desperately needed in today's work environments. His unconventional path from TV actor to high school teacher to real estate developer, managing $500 million in development projects, by the way, ultimately led him to leadership consulting, providing unique insight into the human side of business. And beyond his professional accomplishments, Freeman is most proud of being a devoted husband and father to 3 remarkable adult children. Freeman, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Nick.
I'm excited. My mom is in an accountability group with you, and you come up a lot nowadays, I gotta say. And I've heard you have, I've talked to you already, but I hear every week about how much energy you have and how many new ideas you have. And it's fun to hear, even though it's just through my mom.
Yeah. I'm thrilled to be working with your mom. Your mom's awesome. So
Where do you think?
You come from good stock.
Thank you. One of the things we talked about, I want to dive right in, because one of the things that we talked about, I think, what was that, 4, 5, 6 months ago when we initially had a phone call, was you asked me to think about how can our generations work together. And I want to tee up that conversation a little bit. And I want can you give us a little reminder of like why that came to mind and what you mean by that?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm going to start with the story. It's actually some little short stories that kind of illustrate some of the differences in our generational, let's call it operating system. So in 2015, we gave my father an iPhone for Christmas. He had a flip phone, and he texted on it. He made calls, and that was it. But he wanted to do other things, all the things we do on smartphones. So we gave it to him. And we were sitting there Christmas morning. My kids were around. My brother and his kids were around him. Grandpa's opening his gift. And he's like, I know what this is. He opens it. It's an iPhone. He starts plowing through the box. The beautiful, Apple does such a good job with boxing it. And like he's tearing it apart. I'm like, what are you doing, Dad? He's like, I'm trying to find the directions. And everyone laughed. Like, and my daughter, who was 10 at the time, said, Grandpa, there are no directions, but I can show you how to set it up. Now, mind you, our kids, they didn't have iPhones, and we were very careful not to give them technology. I had gotten an iPad about a month before for my birthday. And because their older brother had said there's an app on there for creating art, we were letting them use it. That was it. And I didn't have time to stick around. I was making breakfast. It was Christmas morning. So I said, okay, fine. And I left to go make breakfast. And my daughter went and helped my father, her grandfather, set up the iPhone. I came back 45, whatever, an hour later and said, okay, breakfast is ready. You guys can set up the phone later. And my daughter said, oh, no, it's all done. And I was like, did you input the email and grandpa's email and set all that up? Yeah. Did you do this, that, and the other? Because I had an iPhone. And she's like, yep, yep, yep. And I asked her, how'd you do that? And she said this. She said, I don't know. And, it was sort of casual. I didn't take it too serious. Like, she doesn't know. Well, she knows, but she doesn't know. So fast forward, she's a senior in high school. Her and her friend, we take them to Disneyland, and I'm exhausted. We're trying to get the hell out of the park, and she's like, "One more ride," and I'm like, "Oh God!" So we walk past it, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, and it says 40-minute wait. So we get in line, sitting there in line. Her and her friend are like, "Let's make a TikTok or let's make a video," and they're like, "Yeah, great." So they start talking about it, filming things. Anyhow, they're voiceovering it. They're doing all in line. We get on the ride, and right before we get on the line, she says, I'm uploading it, boom, and she pushes upload. And I'm like, you can't possibly have made a video that quickly. And so we get off the ride, and I'm like, let me see. And it's so good. The story made sense. It was a minute and a half story or something, but the voiceover they did, the little pows and booms they did, the whole thing blew my mind. And I have played with editing software. It takes me so long, to create that. A, I don't know if I could. B, it would take me hours, days, I don't know. And I asked her, how did you do this? She gave me the same answer. She said, I don't know. Third story, I was taking her to visit colleges, and I told her once she got into her top 5 choices, we would go visit each of them so she could make a decision. So we were rushing to places to see them. So we flew in, we had a tour scheduled, we got to the tour, and then we were going to fly out that night. And my phone went off that our flight was canceled. And I'm like, oh no. But you can book a different flight. And I'm like, wait, we can't go on the tour. I've got to rebook this flight. And so I'm sitting there and I'm reading, and the tour's gathering, and then the tour's getting going, and I'm pushing buttons and reading. And she's like, what are you doing? She grabs the phone from me. She does this thumb thing. And within minutes, she's like, okay, we're rebooked. Tell mama we're flying into Burbank, not LAX, and we're coming in an hour later, or whatever it was. Same thing. I said, how did you do that? She goes, I don't know. And on to the tour. So here's the moral of the story. She doesn't know. And I think your book, actually, you talk about this, or at least you allude to it. It's this idea of iterating. It's this idea where, I have to read things and figure them out and kind of go slow and one step at a time. And I'm kind of scared of making a mistake. You guys aren't. I'll tell one last story, then I promise we can just talk. There's a company that I work with back east in Philly, and they've kind of got this division where the younger people call the older people boomers. They're not all boomers. A lot actually are Gen X, but they call them all boomers. And they're sort of looked down on them. And the older people are really frustrated with the young people. They don't have the right work ethic, whatever their story is, right? And they have some problems that they need to solve. They need to kind of get with 2025, as it were. Actually, this is last year, so it was 2024. They were trying to get with, the modern day. And the younger people kept proposing various tech solutions. But they got a lot of resistance, and they actually got trained in Salesforce. Now, this actually goes back a few years. It took them a lot of effort to finally get it up and running. And then the younger people are like, I think we have a better solution. And the older people were like, ah. And again, we're hitting this moment where younger people, they use technology. They don't necessarily learn it, at least not in the way that my generation does. So for them, it's like, let's try it. Let's use it. Whereas my generation is like, wait, stop. We know how we've always done it. We don't know how to get from where we are, how we've always done it, to how you're saying we should do it. It's so much to process, and it's disorganizing. So that, I hope, cues up kind of what I face out there, working with companies, working across generations, and seeing just some fundamental flaws in terms of the incompatibility of the operating system.
Do you think it's primarily a professional thing, or do you think it's also a personal thing?
Oh, that's another whole topic. Like the whole idea of where your generation has social sensibilities and what language you're using. And there's so many ways the world is moving so fast because information's coming at you guys really fast. And how you assimilate it, how you popularize it, it's so fast. So no, I mean, I have kids your age, right? I have Isabel is 19. She's going to be a sophomore in college here in a second, or she's going in her sophomore year. Antonio's a senior. And I have a much older son too, who's out of college. But yeah, their world and what they're talking about and my ability to keep up, it's sort of like this. And so the instinct, I don't think I do this as much, but a lot of people, especially just slightly older than me, they want to make the younger generation wrong because it's disorganizing. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Right.
And that's where and I think vice versa, because I do hear this terminology boomer, which is an insult to say, it is to say you're not good at technology, which is true. And there's other things that you're slow to catch up with what's going on. And we are.
Usually a little cocky.
And it's cocky.
Yeah.
And but not
Sometimes it is.
yeah, but not without some reason. Like I kind of get it.
Yeah.
You know, so much of what I feel like you were offering in your book, which I had the opportunity to read, was a roadmap for young people to find a way to be successful in the world, right? And I'm going to offer that one of the big ones is, how do you speak into the listening of someone my age? Because we need you. I don't want to tell too many stories. We worked with the Air Force, with Air Education Training Command a few years back. And just the whole long story short of how I didn't know initially how we got the gig. I mean, I understood there was a request for proposal. We put a proposal together, collaborative leadership. I'm like, the Air Force, really? They're going to want this? But they did. And when we ultimately got to know the chief of staff, and one day I asked him, so how did this come about? How did you guys decide you needed to do this collaborative leadership model? And he told me an interesting story. He said there was a situation where everyone salutes the 4-star general. Of course, they stand, they salute. And he got really frustrated one day because he was trying to solve a problem and everyone was sort of pausing and intimidated by him. And he said, everyone needs to tell me, give me input. And he turned to Randy and he said, for the first time in my career, I'm dependent on 20-year-olds. Because they have access to the technology in a way that he doesn't. He's 60 years old. He's a 4-star general. He came up in a world that, it's not that that world doesn't exist, but it's changing at such a rate. You know, I say that whatever you're doing today, it's not that best practices aren't important. They are, but you probably won't be doing them tomorrow, or at least not the same way. So next practices are actually more important. So it's this orientation towards constant change at a rate that, again, my generation doesn't necessarily know what to do with.
I've been playing around with this idea, and the best answer I've come up with so far is based off the sprint model. You know, business sprints?
Business sprints. I know the company sprint.
No, it's a way to develop products, right? You have this idea, and it's basically a way to prototype it, create it. What are assumptions here? And then before you spend a year making it, right? So like make sure it works. And it's a popular thing with like Slack or Google or Facebook.
Iterating. Yeah.
Right.
Instead of trying to get it right, you know you're failing, but you're failing forward.
Right. And if you take a closer look, a sprint team is usually made up of 7 or 8 people. And the way it works is you go fast, nothing's supposed to be right. And the idea is we're going to challenge assumptions and see why we're doing things, which, as you've alluded to, fits perfectly into, you know, the young person generation mindset. But then the key there is there's always a decider. So there's always a decider in the room. And what happens is when you have all those ideas, when you have those group discussions, when you're trying to come up with stuff, it really can drag on and take way longer than it needs to because you get stuck. You're like, I don't know what this idea or this idea or this idea. And so you have a decider in the room. And what happens is that the team gets it down to 2 or 3 ideas. The decider comes in and says, we're doing that one. No questions asked. That's what we're doing. We're moving on. And I think that's a really interesting place for a leader, right? Who's in their 60s, who's, you know, part of the executive team, where you go, okay, look, our team has taken in all this information, which we're really good at because we're young and we use technology and we use AI. And these are the best 3 that we come up with. We like them for different reasons. You've had a lot more experience. You've probably seen these 3 play out in the world already. What do you say?
Perfect.
And they say, we're going this one. great, done. We're going to go do it, test it, come back to you, see what happens.
Yeah.
That's where my mind goes with that.
It's perfect. So that's an exact illustration of something I would train. In fact, I have a team working on something, and I told them next time we meet, all younger than me, I want one practical idea, one stretch idea, and one crazy idea, at least. And the funny thing about the crazy ideas is they usually aren't that crazy because it's a lot to get everything working, right? And then the other thing about young people too is they have a natural, seemingly an innate ability to organize into roles and responsibilities. The collaborative model is, in my mind, the only model that works, right? So top-down leadership, kind of org charts where there's a pecking order, and in a traditional organization, you work your way up by learning all these various things in various places, and you've had all these jobs. Now you have this body of experience to be able to make good decisions. Part of that may still hold up, but a lot of it doesn't, right? Because again, things move too quickly. So the major sort of upgrade, if you will, in the operating system is for leaders my age to learn the collaborative model and practice it. And the thing is, the young people will be like, duh. So there's where we need a little grace, and we need younger people to know it's a retrofit. Like, I'm trying to take an existing model of thinking and upgrade it so it now fits with a changing world. And that's super hard. It's super disorganizing. It's a big blow to our egos because a lot of us grew up in the world of experts where, an expert comes in and tells you how to do things. Nowadays, the expert kills collaboration. We don't want an expert. You can still have expertise, knowledge, and experience. Just don't be the expert, right? So what you're saying is someone with some experience who's guiding the ship, but isn't dictating because they don't know. That's the hard part for us is because we're used to but wait, we grew up in a world where you're supposed to know,
You need a facilitator, not an expert.
I love the word facilitator. So much better. Yeah.
And one of the ways I was thinking about it too is entrepreneurship in a way, right? Like if you look at, some of the big companies, right, that I'm going to use like financial institutions, for example, right? Like the larger financial institutions, the largest ones have extreme guidelines set up and it's super, rigid. It's like, this is how we do things. We have all these meetings, we have all these regulations you have to go through, and it sucks. Like it's usually super boring and you're like, I don't want to do this. But it happens because they can't go down. They can't fail. They can't lose people's money. And then you have kind of smaller community, startups. And those ones are like it's like the Wild West, right? Anything can happen. They can jump through hoops. They can try new products that have never happened before. And then, usually they come up with some solution that the big bank's never heard of. And then the big bank goes, okay, we're going to start doing that. But what happens is the smaller one oftentimes also crashes the ship because they weren't prepared because they didn't have the regulations and they didn't have the safety. And I think, the entrepreneurship idea is, you take that and you put that within the bigger company and you go, okay, look, I'm been here for 50 years and I understand how to run this business and I'm okay with an expert and doing the slower things and making sure over the next 50 years we're going in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
And your group of people cannot think that far ahead because your attention spans aren't like that and that kind of bores you and you're not your skill set. And so you guys go come up and you guys try and break this thing that we have and I'll take the good bits out of it and the rest will move on.
It's so good. So Robbie Richmond, who is the guy who coined the phrase entrepreneurship, and he was kind of a leadership, I don't want to use the word guru, but that's what's coming to mind, at Zappos. Back in the early days, Zappos had Zappos University, and Robbie Richmond ran that originally. Anyhow, just a little background on that terminology. Fantastic. Yes, and also when big companies acquire smaller companies, I had the opportunity to work with the North Face. And they were acquired by VF Corp. In fact, we worked with VF Outdoor and Sport, which we just work with the North Face and JanSport, but they're both part of this. They were in a hub in Alameda, California. They aren't anymore, but when we worked with them, they were. And the idea is we want your culture. We want your innovation. So we're a big company. We're going to buy you, but we're not going to touch what you're doing internally because we want to keep it going. When we came in, there was some dissatisfaction because even though that was the narrative, the bigger company was meddling and people were pissed about it. And so there was this whole culture reset, which was the work we were supposed to do. And then the big company announced that they were shutting down those offices and moving the headquarters to Denver. And they thought that most of their senior leadership team would go with them, and they did not. So, but the point you're trying to make, which is brilliant, is how do we find either inspire within the organization some level of autonomy and ownership, or acquire smaller companies that can bring that spirit of entrepreneurship inside of the organization to foster, some evolution and some creative
even
thinking.
Even on a lower scale within teams, right? Every team is going to have a leader. Every team is going to have, kind of the number two, and then you kind of got like the lower level analysts who are doing more of the grunt work. But there's still a space there where you can have those crazy ideas. Like you had your three, like I want a good idea, a crazy idea, and then like an insane idea, right? It's like, okay, well, the analyst can give you the insane idea, and then the associate can give you the kind of crazy idea, and then once it gets to the VP, you can go like, okay, those are a little too much, but occasionally one will hit, right?
Yeah.
And I also think it might be a good way too for retention, in the sense of like it can get boring to be the lower level person, and if you get more opportunities to throw fun ideas out there, and one of them eventually hits, like you said, like that's going to feel a little more ownership wise and more creative and more fun.
Okay, so in the collaborative model, the team model, two things. One is that it's more project-based. There's a company called W.H. Gore. So if you know the Gore-Tex product, which is what a lot of hiking shoes are made out of, and other things, because it's water repellent. That fabric was created by W.H. Gore. It's called Gore-Tex. But they create lots of things. There's some number of $1 billion a year company. Like, it's a big number. And what's interesting is they're all about innovation. So they don't hire for roles, they hire talent. And then they have people, and they kind of know where people are going to go. Don't get me wrong. They look at people's resume and whatnot, and they're trying to line things up. But they have people self-organize in their roles and responsibilities. And you're on project teams. And so even if someone is, been there longer, has greater accountability, maybe obviously greater pay, they still might just be on a project team where some lower person has greater accountability for that project. And so you're always mixing it up. And this is my model. And there's this way that people opt into roles and responsibilities as opposed to getting them assigned for one very good reason. When you take on like a job description, let's say there's 10 things on the job description, you get the job. If 9 of those 10 are things you do really well, but one of them is something you don't do well, but it's in your job description, you'll spend 90% of your energy on the 10% of the job that you don't do well. In my world, you shouldn't be doing that. We want to have people opt into roles and responsibilities so that they're doing what they're good at. And that's how we operate more in a zone of genius, excellence. And that's why as a team, we find flow, because people are finding their way into roles. And your generation does this almost automatically. I mean, I can put a bunch of young people together, just in our living room. My daughter was just home and a bunch of her old buddies came over, and I was like, well, why don't you guys figure it out? I'm like, da-da-da-da-da-da. They figured it out. Like, there's this natural way everyone jumps in and contributes. And again, my generation is waiting to see what your rank is, and do you have the right to say that? And it's not the same operating system. So you guys, the future belongs to young people, and again, that's really hard for some of us to think about. So how do we harness the talent and energy and natural orientation, of young people so they can do the work, and where's our contribution? It's not the same role we've played, and that's tough.
Yeah. I would say 2 things there. One is, when you're talking about outsourcing, right, and not doing the things that you're not good at, that's one of the beauties of AI. Is AI, I can outsource 70% of the things I don't want to do to AI, right? Like there's a level of like, this thing can't get messed up, so I don't trust it with AI yet, but eventually I'll be able to trust, basically everything with it. And then the other thought I had there was the idea of, I've heard you and my mom's talked about it to me, and I'm assuming you two have talked about information flowing down faster and better than ever has before. And I think that's one of the cool things of, I'm getting advice from people in Gen X that, in a way that you weren't getting advice from people 2 generations above you, right? Because you didn't have social media, information couldn't travel in that sense. And I think one of the interesting aspects of it is it humanizes people, and it also makes people, less scary, right? Like, I think there's this idea of there's my boss's boss, and you're like, okay, that person, you have this whole story in your head because you've never heard of them back in the day, right? You're like, this, if you're only hearing through other people, right? But then nowadays I'm like, oh, I can go to his LinkedIn, I can see his Instagram account, right? I see that his daughter makes funny TikToks, and it really makes it in the sense of like, at least for me, I don't know if it's a personal thing or a generational thing. It's probably a bit of both, but like, I don't feel a level of intimidation or like this person is godly when I meet, senior, like, people in higher positions than me. You know what I mean? I understand like they put in the work and they know more than I do, but it's not a sense of like, they're better than me.
Okay, so here's one of the great equalizers. There's a couple things I want to say about this. First of all, information is authority. That was the model. So growing up, we called the smartest kid in the class, what we called the smartest kid in the class, an encyclopedia. What that meant is they had the ability to memorize and retain lots of information. It made them an authority. Now, any 7-year-old with one of these is smarter than anyone who we previously called the encyclopedia. The information is ubiquitous. Everyone has it. You have one of these, you can Google it, right? And the crazy thing right now is not only Google it, AI will synthesize it. So like, we're already blowing out that paradigm. So that's gone. Confidence, you talk about confidence in your book. Confidence used to come from mastery. It now comes from adaptability. So it used to be, I'm confident because I know the answer. Now it's, I'm confident I can find the answer. That is earth-shattering shift, right?
Yep.
So again, it's really interesting. And, where is the place for a 57-year-old? I'd love for you, I want to do cross-mentoring with some young people. I promise you there's things I can teach and show you that'll be helpful for you. I'm certain of it. But there's lots of things you can show and teach me. I mean, like my daughter going, here, she can't actually teach me because, again, the operating system is different, but I can rely on her as a resource. And I want young people on my team for that very reason. And what I need you to tell me is what I need to do to stay relevant. So some of this is, what AI I should be using, and what language or what's going on in your guys' world to help me stay relevant and current. And I don't want to be the geeky old guy who's pretending to be 22. I'm not, but I do want access to it, and I don't totally know how to have it, right? So there's a lot that I need from you. So if we can find a way and be generous resources for each other, not the company I was talking about on the East Coast where they're calling each other names, that's not going to get us there. So I think young people who recognize 2 things. One is that older people do still hold the purse strings. They still are in the decision-making roles within organizations. So you do need them. And if you can create value for them, I promise you'll get paid. Right? That's the key. And then how do you speak into their listening so you can partner with them more? This idea that you're no longer intimidated because they did all these steps to know something, those steps aren't required anymore. You got one of these, you did it already. Save your car fare. You're already there. So there's this way that things have been equalized, right? And so you can start at a different level. And so it is far more like, how can we support each other? If you can crack that code and really speak into the listening of 50-something so they don't feel stupid, because we do sometimes, and vice versa, invite a conversation where they can meet you and see you where you're at in a more honoring way. They don't feel like they have to diminish you because they're intimidated or something. That's going to crack something open that is huge. And that's what I want to train, maybe with you. Maybe we'll come up with a training. But I want to teach this so we can all cross-generationally understand, wait, we need each other. But we don't work well together. Why? They're different operating systems. So we need a bridge.
I mentioned it earlier with the phone and AI being able to get information so fast. And I think quantity has already been solved. right? Like, I don't think, like the kid with the encyclopedia who has more information, who can get the most information, or even the 21-year-old who's good at using AI to get information really fast. Like, I think that's going to go away because like AI can do that. Like, I could teach you AI, like ChatGPT, pretty fast, right? You still need someone to teach you, sure. But I think we're actually pretty level in that sense. And I think from your generation standpoint, the two things that you have above us are quality, like making quality decisions of like, look, I've just lived more life and I have a better gut reaction of what is going to work out here. And then the second one I think would be getting shit done. And I say that because your generation didn't really have a choice most of the time. And we often have way too many choices. Right. So like you didn't really have a choice of like how you're structured, like, of your career path. Right. It was more like, hey, you're going to, I mean, I don't know if it was, but from my understanding, talking to my parents, right. It's like, hey, we're going to go to college. You're going to get a baseline job and you're going to slowly work your way up. Right. And then me, it's like, okay, well, I could be a TikTok star. I could be a professional gamer. I could, I could try and be a chef or an entrepreneur. Like I could do anything. And I think people are really overwhelmed and people my age are really bad at getting shit done because there's too many options and it almost seems like too easy.
Yeah, so here's the piece I think that's a thread that kind of solves for that. This goes back to my work. So it's kind of like iterating. One of the things I do with clients is I help them figure out peak experiences. So I have them list out 10 things that were peak experiences where they accomplished something or they did something that felt like this expression of their gifts, talents, and abilities. This may sound woo-woo. That's kind of points to a destiny that they're meant to reach. Like they know, because I call them perfect moments, right? You've had them where it's like, whoa. And so what happens when you're young is you associate the experience with the thing you're doing. And it was the thing you're doing, playing soccer or singing at a concert or I don't know, whatever you're doing, art, some kind of art thing you did or whatever. And that's fine. But as we get older, I'm not going to I can't play soccer. Well, I mean, maybe I could, but I probably hurt myself. So, but what is the quality of experience? What were the factors that made that really an expression of my gifts and talents? And then how do I find expression for that now in my life? And so what we begin to do is we begin to check out what are the gifts, talents, abilities, what are the qualities of experience I want more of, and then find expression for that. And then that's the breadcrumbs you want to follow. So even if something's short-lived, what inspired you to do it? What about it did you like? What about it did you not like, which is also part of the equation. So you actually become clearer on your criteria for what you say yes to. It's so funny because your mom and I are just working on this right now. What's the criteria for my yes, right? What really inspires me? What are the moments in time where I know I hit it, because that was what I'm up to. And how do I find more expressions for that? So I think, because some of the work ethic stuff is a little bit of a double-edged sword. A lot of people in my generation will be very proud that they work hard. And I always say to them, well, does that mean you want to make work hard?
Yeah.
And they do sometimes. And they're making it harder than it has to be. Now, the opposite's true. Your generation loves the hack, loves the shortcut. So you're always doing shortcuts because you want to move fast. So I do think there's a balancing. I'm acknowledging that what you're saying is true, like a little more resilient, a little more ability to stick with it, think things through when they're hard versus
Your vision. You know what I mean? A little more like why. Like you asked your daughter, how'd you do that? And it's like, well, I don't know. I just did it. Right? I found the hack. I found it, and I did it. Versus like, well, I really enjoy making TikToks and, this is a fun creative expression for me. So I learned how to do it.
Yes. And then I would ask a lot of questions about what was fun. What did you enjoy? Where else have you had that experience? So what happens is we start to identify the quality and the expression, and then where else can you look for opportunities to experience that? And that's how you're more likely to slip into genius, because genius is always a gift. You can't plan it, right? It's always like, oh, who knew that was going to, and it's almost an accident every time, So there's something about that. It's funny because your mom and I were talking about, I tell stories. I don't totally know why I tell stories. Like I can tell part of why I do it, but it doesn't have it's not exactly how I make money. I mean, in my work, I can use storytelling, but none of the stories I go and tell at the Moth or at, these showcases are really something I could take into a business client per se. They're personal stories. But anyhow, I told her one. She's like, "Oh my God, I have the response to that one," and so she's writing it. So we were saying, well, what if we did like a podcast, and I tell my story, then you tell your story as a response, and then the next time will tell a response to your story, and like that's it. So again, that's one of those things that in our generation, it's really hard to just do those kinds of things because we think, well, how do you make money off that, or how does that fit with my career? And I think most people in our generation have it too rigid. Whereas I think your generation, because of this iterating, is far more willing to play and just try it. So I actually think we need to get better at what you all naturally do. And it's likely that you all could learn something about being more rigorous and sticking with it and having a bit more of a plan. I think that makes sense, right?
When I mentioned that your daughter might say, "Oh, I had fun making, this TikTok." And you're like, well, my first thought was I'd ask her, okay, well, what was fun about it, right? And something we're really bad at is reflection most of the time and just sitting and thinking. I've had it a couple times where like I'll be sitting on the couch and I'll just at my apartment in college and I'll just be like looking out the window and I'm just thinking about stuff. And my roommates will be like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just like thinking." They're like, "What?" Like that's not a real thing, right? Like nobody sits and thinks. That's not like that doesn't happen. And I think there's one thing you could do that I don't think AI could do is I talk to you about my day or my things that are going on, that are going well, that I'm liking, that I'm not liking. And in a therapeutic sense, almost like you're analyzing and going, okay, like what are the underlying deeper, longer term things going on there? Right. So like your daughter liking TikTok, she'd be like, okay, well, I actually think you might want to try some creative paths as your career. Right. That could be an underlying part of that. Or, maybe, you should spend more time with that friend because that friend, you seem to like light up when you're around her. And, that's something that I don't think she would take the time to really think about or analyze like on her own, or at least most young people wouldn't. And if you could do that and then give it to her in a format like ChatGPT would, where you go, look, we had this 30-minute conversation and these are my five bullet points that I took away that I think are deeper underlying things that you didn't realize because you don't think about it.
So one thing you just said that's brilliant, because we talk in my world about speaking into people's listening. You have to meet people where they're at. If you have really good advice for someone, but they can't hear it, it's not generous.
Yeah.
In fact, it's disorganizing, so don't say it. So it has to be a way to communicate it. So I love what you said is give it to her how ChatGPT would give it to her.
Yeah, literally.
Because that's a frame of reference. The other thing that we're talking about here is like, look, learning is more important than knowing. But there's a difference. I'm learning against the backdrop of a lot of experience, whereas a lot of things you're learning brand new. So we're going back to the idea of the older person maybe being able to create context for younger people. But again, I think it works both ways because young people create context for us. There is this way that the world is moving that I don't know entirely how to stay abreast of. So if younger people, this sounds like advice, but I'm just meandering and thinking about it. If you can, it seems to me, really get good at helping translate for the 57-year-old brain how to handle this, how to just accommodate a little bit, because we know you're smarter and faster and all these other things in a particular way. And maybe I'm not asking you not to be that, but maybe I am. Not so much so that I get lost. In other words, slow down for me to catch up, and then I can bring the experience, and we can really help each other if we just work together, right?
I think the key there is you're saying, you bring me into your life process, and the first thing I would go is like, okay, run me through your day-to-day, run me through what you're doing, and I'll run you through how I think you can make it faster.
Yes.
And then I think one of the key things that you maybe have not thought about in terms of you can actually make our life faster, which I've been playing around of like, look, you can save me. I'm saving you minutes because I'm showing you how to use ChatGPT to schedule stuff for you. Like you can save me years because you helped me catch on to this long-term vision idea that I wouldn't have caught onto unless I actually lived that life experience, right? There's certain things ChatGPT cannot teach you, right? Life has to teach you. And we're all about speed. And so, you could make that argument of like, look, you're going to save me a day. I'm going to save you a year.
Yeah.
But you're going to, like you said, you'd have to give it to me in the format of, very quick, very easy, because otherwise I'm not going to listen to you. And, it's hard. We're also not great listeners. We don't take advice super well. I think we like
Yeah.
to seek out things that we like to seek out advice like on reels or this or that, and we're like, oh, that's the hack. But in terms of like sitting down and hearing like life advice, like if you
Yeah.
don't make it really quick and really
Sound bites.
if you don't
Yeah.
soundbite it and make it personal, like we're probably not going to listen.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Well, and what you said before about how your generation, the ability to slow down, it's in your book about being, I'm going to use the word contemplative. Here's the thing. My generation was bored. Like we didn't have the things. We had like Atari and Pong. Well, we had
Right.
Pong before Atari. Like that is not a game you want to sit around and play. It's boring. It was boring then even, but it was cool because like, look, you can do this on the TV. That's cool. Most of the time we were sitting outside looking up at the, clouds and like, laying on the grass. And now I kind of long for that. Like I want more of that because the same disease you guys have, which is short attention span, we have it too. Like just because we were around before it was a thing, and there is something about unplugging that's really important. And we can speak to that, but that doesn't mean we do it because
Yeah.
we're caught in the same thing. Like, information's coming. Look, this is cool. And it's like, stop. Is it all, just too
Yeah.
much sometimes?
Yeah, I like to think about it too of like, I've talked before in other podcasts about your generation being usually having more social skills or being able to do harder things or having thicker skins and this and that. And, I've also talked about me like waking up early for a job now, right? Like I wake up early all the time, but it's like, I don't wake up early because I want to. I wake up early because I have to get to work on time. It's like you didn't develop a thick skin because you were 19, was like you were 15, or like, man, I really need to develop a thick skin for life.
Right.
You're like, no, the world was just a little harsher back then. All right. Or you had more social skills, not because you're like, oh, this is good for me. You were like, no, you had to go to the cafeteria. You had to meet people at a bar, right?
Yes.
You had to go to class.
Yeah.
And we don't have to do any of those things. And so like, that's been a big part of, when I coach other people, it's like structure of like, you almost have to force yourself in a lot of these situations.
Yeah. So here's the piece about that I think is really valuable. Lots of things you said are valuable, but here's a piece of it. So one of the things I think my generation did is we stayed in relationship longer. My wife, I didn't meet her online. I met her I met her at the Lava Lounge in Hollywood. Probably not the best place to meet someone. I met her at a bar, but whatever. But I didn't have swipe left. I didn't have an infinite amount of options. So we had to find compatibility. We had to stay in relationship because we didn't have the option to just swipe left or right. I don't know which way you swipe. I never online dated. Okay. But my point is, there's something about that. There's something about picking up the phone and calling, because I watch these text threads, even in my world, where it's like, okay, this is not a text, everyone. This is where you get on the phone and work some stuff out. This has complexity. Right now, I'm confused and I'm misunderstanding, and the misunderstanding is just going to get worse. Please stop. And they don't. People keep going and in group texts, and you go, this is not the way to do it. Someone pick up the phone and call, please. So those are kinds of things, where you stay in a relationship through discomfort because you can't just swipe left and be done. And that you actually communicate in a way where you can have nuanced conversations, because text isn't going to get the job done.
Yeah. And one of the big things I've realized and seen quantitatively and qualitatively is like the world right now, especially for younger generations, is just teed up to be dominated by the top 10%. Like if you look, we'll use dating apps, for example, right? If you look at dating apps, the top 10% people that were rated like attractiveness get 90% of the right swipes, right? And then the bottom 90% get 10%, right? And then you look at salaries. It's like, okay, the people that are going to go work for Google and go work for Goldman Sachs are going to get $130,000 out of college. And then everyone else is left with like $60,000 wages that with inflation, like is not enough. And you look at you look at social skills and you go, okay, well, 90% of people nowadays are not comfortable enough to go up and say hi to someone at a bar and just start a conversation with them. I would say, I genuinely believe in that number. Like 90% I don't think would do it. I think 10% would. And then those 10% are in a great spot because they're the only ones doing it. They have no competition. And, there's many ways to look at that. Like part of it's sad, part of it's motivating because you're like, okay, well, I can go out there and dominate. Part of it is you could say business opportunity because there's clearly a need there, but it's a really interesting observation that I've seen. And,
One of the things you spoke to is gamifying. So dating is a game now.
Yes.
And so again, it's dehumanizing. This is again this clever thing, which my generation invented clever. Like we were the ones who were like, I think there's an easier way to do this. Because all these tools you're using came about, with my generation going, I think we can find an easier way to do this. Now it's sort of like a runaway train. And gamifying makes me nervous because there's people involved. We don't want to gamify choosing a mate. It's not a winning game. I mean, it is if you can stay in the difficult parts of the relationship and be a good partner, and all of which doesn't feel good. And we're back to the resilience to actually be in real life versus this sort of quick hit, dopamine hit
Optics are more of
world.
a thing than they ever were, right? Like when you're in high school, it's like, okay, well, I don't just want a girlfriend so I can take pictures and post it online so everyone knows I have a girlfriend. You're like, no one knows I have a girlfriend unless I tell them or they see me together, right? Like now there's definitely an underlying sense there of like, well, I get to share to the world that I have a girlfriend and that feels good and looks good, right? And it's like, well, that shouldn't be part of your motivation at all, but it is.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember pictures took a week and a half to get developed. You had to take the film in, drop it up, go back and get it. There was actually something brilliant about getting your pictures because you were excited. Like, what's the pictures?
What's
And
funny too is like now we have apps that will do that. Like there's like vintage camera apps where like the whole idea is like you take a picture and then it'll spit it out to you in like a vintage way.
oh,
Or
that's
like there's
funny.
apps, there's apps out there that like you take a picture and then it won't give it to you for like 24 hours. Or
Oh
it's
my
like,
God.
and it's so interesting how it's like they're like, okay, well, like we'll get back to the basics a little bit. Or like
Yeah, yeah.
it's wild.
It is wild. It is wild. Again, I think one of the things though is even if my generation learned certain things, because of the way things have changed, we've forgotten them. So I think, generally speaking, there's a rediscovery of um, some of those things in life, like slowing down, like being with people in a way that is more than just quick, more than just sound bites, that we dig into something a little bit more. So I feel like we're learning it too.
Yeah. One of the things that you are remarkable at is storytelling. And I
Hmm.
want to talk about that because I love storytelling,
Hmm.
both personally and professionally.
Hmm.
Right? Like great communicate. You could have a shitty product and be a great communicator and you're going to be able to sell that and vice versa. Right. You mentioned it earlier. Like you could help somebody, but you don't know how to communicate to them. You're not helping them at all.
Hmm.
And I mean, part of it is you got a great voice. I mean,
Hmm.
you mentioned you did radio before, but there's plenty more to it than your great voice. Like, what do you think makes a great storyteller?
So some part of it is it's a craft. I mean, it can rise to the level of art for sure, but really it starts off as a craft. So if you're attracted to it, you like it, you listen to them, stories. I mean, I do the Moth, but there's other. So the Moth Story Hour. I love Snap Judgment. I love StoryCorps, which is actually Dave Isay is a great aggregator of stories and cut editing and then narrating you through the story. He's a genius at that. So some part of it is learning the craft. And then what I love about stories is this as a personal process. So when I start to write a story, I rediscover the events in the telling of it. I remember things I previously didn't. Honestly, I have to aggregate things to speed up time and to make things fit together. So it's not really all about being accurate about past events. It's more being truthful in your understanding of the deeper threads than, relaying exactly what happened. That's not what we're doing here. So it's a interesting process of discovering and rediscovering, and then ultimately we're talking about finding your voice, which once you have that, then then you really do have a power in the world and how you show up, right? Especially if you're crafting that sort of with some consciousness. But
Do you mean your style or your actual tone?
uh, and your um, point of view, your unique way of seeing and perceiving the world that is related in a way that people can experience it, right? So when I do trainings, I can teach information. I can, but usually there has to be some exercise or experience for them to experience it, or I can tell a story and people get it. so much more than the, sort of logistical information. Here are the 3 steps. It's like, let me tell you this story. And people are like, oh, that makes sense. You did this, this, and this. Right. Those are the 3 steps, or whatever it is. So there's this way that the story meets us at a level where we can hear it and experience it more, I don't know if the word's authentically, more deeply, something like that. So for me personally, to be able to tell my stories, I'm creating a voice and hopefully I love my voice, the voice that I'm creating, not just the vocal tones and the style, like you said, but the sort of themes I tend to pull out and want to talk about. And I'm discovering myself and my life and reimagining my life by going back through past events and interpreting them and reinterpret them and so forth.
You write stories down, like memorable things that happen, and then go back and
Constantly.
okay, yeah.
Constantly taking notes, constantly hearing someone say something. We hike. My wife and I hike at least 2 times a week, sometimes 3. And it's a busy hike because it's LA. So people are always talking. And I'm like, oh my God, it's like therapy on the mountain. You're hearing everyone talking about their lives. And like you get these little sound bites. And there's such good stories. And I just write them down. And it's not even that I'm going to write a story about that person necessarily. It's more just, it's this idea of the story, of people's stories, of how stories take shape. And they remind me of things. And then I get to writing another story. So, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like an artist. You know what I mean? It really does sound like someone writing music, like your process.
Yeah. Well, and it came from when I first started acting. So I was a professional actor. I was a soap star for a minute in the mid-90s. And I guest starred on a bunch of different shows back in the day before you were born. And what happened with acting, I started acting because I started acting to meet girls. I went to SI in San Francisco when it was still all boys, and there were no boys in the football team. I hurt myself playing football, and I was out, and my friend was doing a play at the girls' school, and I went and watched it, and I went to the cast party. I had more fun than I've ever had, and I was like, I want to do a play. And I had done some acting before, just as a kid, and I was like, okay, I want to do this. So I did it, and I auditioned for a play. I quit the football team. The guys didn't like that. But what happened is I felt like I could be more real in character than I could in my real life. Everyone always told me as a kid I was too much, I felt too much, I was too big, whatever. In character, I could do all this. And it was this high. I wanted more of that. And as I grew with my craft, I would discover the character because it takes a minute to discover the character. You're reading it, you're thinking about it, maybe you audition for it, but you're finding the character. And then you'd also be discovered by the character. There's this way that I'd kind of know myself better at the end because I lived into this experience that wasn't necessarily mine. But in playing it out, it was very, I don't know, informative and kind of cathartic and like, wow, I felt like I was a deeper, more dimensional human being for having learned and been this character for however long the run was or the episode I was shooting on a TV, series or something like that. So that's part of what storytelling is too. It's got that quality of like, I live in a relationship with this art form that it both informs my life and defines my life, but vis-a-vis my creative expression, not because someone told it to me. I'm doing it, right?
Yeah. And what's really cool about that is you're not viewing storytelling in the sense that most people do, which is just a retelling of events. You're viewing it as like almost like a short story or a character or this arc of this hero's journey of this moment in time that's like its own unique, precious, valuable thing, opposed to, hey, I'm just going to retold you what happened, right? Like there's this like sphere here and then like a straight line here. And it's super interesting to see you think about it and look at it.
Well, so there's a little piece of this puzzle where we live our lives in story. In the trainings, we do this module. I'm curious time-wise if we're okay.
We're good.
Okay. So I asked this question. How many of you know someone who plays the victim? I'm in a room full of people, and everyone raises their hand. I raised my hand. I said, before you put your hand down, how many of you play the victim? And I said, notice my hand is up. I think we all do it. And then I whiteboard, what is the payoff for playing the victim? What do you get? And we come up with a bunch of things. And it's usually an interesting conversation. The bottom line is we get to be right about something, right? So then I say, okay, we're gonna play a little game. Everyone loves a game. I want you to tell your story, some way that you got screwed over. No childhood trauma. We're not doing that. Take something recent, though I like to talk about my ex-wife because I can tell you all the ways she screwed me over. That's easy. And so tell that story. And your job, the goal of the game is to get the payoff. So once you know you've hooked them, and as the listener, all you're doing is listening. And once you're in with these things we've listed, throw your hand up. And so hands start going up. And we do this in 90 seconds. It's super fast, but all the hands go up. And sometimes 2 hands go up. I'm like, if you're really in, you're going to grab a pitchfork and go to that person's house, throw both hands up. And so like everyone's kind of laughing about it. We switch. And then I have them get up, change partners. And I say, now this time I want you to tell the story. It's the same story, but I want you to tell it from the perspective of how did I create the situation? Or what part did I play? Or if you can't get either of those, how important it was that I went through this experience in order to learn something. And so everyone does that. And I say, how different was that story? And people are like, it was so different. I remembered these facts and I remembered this and that. And oh my God. And so I asked them, which story was true? And you know the answer to this. Which story is true? They're both true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then the only question becomes which story serves you. And so the shift is events happen in life. The events themselves are fairly neutral. They don't have any inherent meaning. But the story we tell about those events are consequential. They determine what's possible and not possible in our lives. They frame our lives. So we live our lives in stories. And there are stories we probably want to put down or reframe. And the converse of this, just to throw something else in the mix, is we also have the experience of people who are running a story on us. Like they're telling a story about us, but it's made up. It's their story, and we don't have to buy into that. So here's the thing, going back to what storytelling actually does to empower us, is we get the opportunity to frame and relate to our personal stories in a way that brings more heart, more humanity, some learning maybe, and we get to share that in a way where that's one of the most empowering things you can do, is own your frickin' story, right? And don't let your stories own you, because we get stuck in stories. You know, family members get stuck in stories and don't talk to each other for 10 years. What the hell was that about? Most of it was made up. No one even remembers what the original fight was about. It was just stories.
Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Before we wrap up, I would love to hear, speaking of stories, one of your favorite stories.
So
I told you this on the phone. I swear I told you this.
The story I want to share with you is called, or I'm calling it, a developmental stage of consciousness. Complicated title, simple story. I want to tell you about an almost girlfriend from college, Amy. I say almost because of the circumstances. We were neighbors in off-campus apartments that we were both subletting for the summer, right after my freshman year. Proximity prompted our budding romance. Neither of us was working that hard to determine if we were a long-term match. I was focused on her hot body and her long brown hair, not her core values or life goals. She was striving for some type of newly realized maturity or liberation. I was like an experiment to her in a more empowered way of being with men. Like Sharon Stone in Basic Instinct, except not exactly that hot. Still hot, just more Catholic school college in the 1980s kind of hot. The relationship was fun and very sexual, but not necessarily that deep due to the reality that she was going on semester abroad for her first semester of her junior year. A baked-in exit plan. My 20-year-old self was thrilled. Summer loving, to quote Grease, had me a blast. Honestly, she was a little out of my league. She was a year older, drove a BMW, and was on the pill. My first sexual partner ever on the pill. A summer fling, lots of spontaneous sex, no pressure, catch you later? Yes, please. A fling is, by definition, not a thing. A thing is something you're trying to figure out. Like, is this a thing? A fling offers permission. There's a kind of joy in not trying to figure out where it's going. 3 words to characterize this fling: lazy, lust, and laughs. There were no friends to meet. We weren't prepping each other to meet the other person's parents. No compatibility tests to pass. We just had fun. And our goodbye wasn't tragic. No tears. We kissed passionately. I ran my fingers through her beautiful hair. Catch you later, I said. Alligator, she replied with a huge smile on her face. On to the next adventure. As I watched her drive away in her cute little Beamer, a whole host of feelings rushed over me. In my head, it sounded like, wow, that was an experience. When she returned mid-year, she called. She was excited to see me. She had a surprise. The pill's like 98% effective, right? She didn't sound upset. I was intrigued and excited to see her too. We met in the quad on the lawn in front of the theater. I didn't initially recognize her as she approached me from the rose garden. The big surprise was not that she was pregnant. It was that she cut off all of her beautiful brown hair. I blame Sinead O'Connor for this. Sinead had inspired more than a few young women to shave it off that summer of 1987. My mouth managed a few kind words, but what I was saying was clearly inconsistent with the message on my face. It unwound from there. I tried to cover, but what I meant was not the response she wanted. She had been so excited to reveal the new Amy to me. Our relationship, she explained, had given her permission to be spontaneous and free, and she was more European now. She was selling me on dating her. I couldn't do it. The problem was that we had a physical attraction, a fun, carefree summer fling, without the thing scrutiny required to negotiate this type of moment. Sure, her hair would grow back. Part of me knew that. Was I really that shallow? Yes, I was that shallow. And it was developmental. 1, the developmental stage of our relationship, and 2, my emotional, social, psychological stage of development. I was a 20-year-old boy man. FYI, the teenage knucklehead phase doesn't instantly pass when a male turns 20. I was an artsy knucklehead, but my priorities, mentality had only developmentally progressed so far. I made up an excuse, lied that I was seeing someone. Nice to see you, let's stay friends, yada, yada, yada. Tears welled up in her eyes. Should I hug her? No, that might make things worse. I stood there confused. I thought I'd gotten away with this one. Summer lover, no strings, no painful breakups, no drama. No, this isn't what I signed up for. I was going to get out of this without feeling bad. It ended awkwardly with a weird wave goodbye. I felt bad, really bad. To this day, I feel bad. The reason I tell this story is simple. There's a developmental stages of consciousness. Today, I have so much respect for what Amy was going through, trying to find her authentic self. Truthfully, I didn't want to know her authentic self. I didn't have the mental, emotional, spiritual capacity to go that deep. So, to all the Amys out there who had their hearts broken by knucklehead guys, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I wasn't developmentally mature enough to appreciate more than your body, to recognize your soul. I did grow up. It just took about a decade.
Really good. I like that.
Thank you.
I mean, we call them situationships. You heard that? Yeah. I mean, you were telling that experience, and I'm like, oh, I've definitely heard friends tell that experience before.
For sure.
It's like that. That's great. I love that. How long did it take you to write something like that?
Well, it came out very fast. We had gotten home from a trip to Berlin. It was 4:30 in the morning. I popped up because I couldn't sleep. Of course, it was midday in Berlin. And I just sat down and wrote, and it came out in maybe an hour. Now, the fiddling with it, there's a certain number of hours that go into fiddling with it, but that's fun. But the actual story coming out fast. Yeah. I write them all the time. I mean, I wrote one a couple days ago. Again, they come out. I'll also sit down and write a story, know that it's not a good story, but it has bits and pieces. And then I'll just log it in my list I have a folder of stories. And there's all these and then I'll go back sometimes and label them as to where they are so I can kind of look at them. And if I need a story, because someone wants me to actually, keynote something or something, I'll go back and look for what would be a good one. And then I go back into it and work it out to fit the event or whatever.
Freeman, before we get out of here, how can listeners interact or find you outside of this?
Yeah, I should be better and easier. That's going to be something you can help me with. I guess Freeman Michaels at Facebook. The good news with my name is there's not a lot of us. And I'm on LinkedIn. I should be on Instagram. I am. I just never check it. But I should. So yeah, Instagram. I think it's all just Freeman Michaels. Again, it's a guy that looks like me. And there's not a lot of people whose first name is Freeman. So that's maybe the best way to find me.
Freeman Michaels, it's flipped.
Well, there's a little story there. When I became an actor, I got a letter from the Screen Actors Guild saying you can't be Michael Freeman. That's what I grew up as. So growing up, all the guys called me Freeman. So I answered to it. I didn't want to be some strange name like Scott. I'm not Scott. So Freeman is a name I go by. So I just flipped them and added an S. And then at some point, legally, I changed my name because I was going by two names. And I like my name, Freeman Michaels. But so my brother is Jim Freeman. My dad's John Freeman. And then the whole family tree goes left. And there's Freeman Michaels, Jasmine Michaels, Antonio Michaels, Isabella Michaels. The whole thing went off the rails a little bit. But that's the true story of how it happened.
Freeman, thank you for coming on.
All right, bro. Thanks for having me.